So I mentioned earlier that preparation is on, where the countdown is on at my house. School is coming. It's coming a little earlier for us because my wife and I are actually going to be out of town while our kids start the first day of school. So we're trying to make sure all the preparations are ready under the threat of Nana, but trying to make sure everything's ready to go so that it's all taken care of. And I realize that we talk a lot about like new goals and fresh starts and new resolutions. We talk about that a lot during the new year, but as we've talked in here before, I'm not sure that for many of our families in the Pleasant Grove community, I'm not sure that for most of us that the new year really feels like a fresh anything. In fact, for at least my house, and I'm assuming for many of yours, it's really the fall that feels like a fresh beginning because you're starting into new routines. You have the stuff that you're like, okay, this year, we're going to be organized. We're going to buy this thing that we're going to hang on the wall, the calendar that's going to tell us where everything is. Or this year, all of the shoes are going to go right here in this spot so that you don't have to run around and find your shoes. Sure, just my house. Okay. Right? We're going to do all of the things. And so as we embark on this new start, I kind of wanted to offer some final instructions before we get into the school year and to this stuff. And so we're gonna do that for the next couple of weeks. We're gonna offer some instructions on how to maybe as we're starting to build those routines, some ideas of some things to include or some ways to kind of prepare ourselves. And today we're gonna talk about something that maybe is something we don't talk about enough, but is a common experience in the Christian church. We're going to talk about exile. Now, I had an interesting experience with this not too long ago. I shared last week that I had been doing a little bit of traveling, and I had to go to North Carolina. And so I flew, I booked a flight. I needed to be in Raleigh, but I booked a flight into Charlotte, and then I took a 30-minute flight, it took us longer to get to cruising altitude than we were at cruising out to a 30-minute flight from Charlotte to Raleigh, because apparently I don't know a globe. I'm not really sure like why I needed to make the stop in Charlotte, but that's what they decided I needed to do. And so I fly into Charlotte. Everything goes well. My plane lands early. How often does that happen? And I'm like, guess what? The gate that I needed, it was the very next gate, like right there. I mean, I was like, this is amazing. I've got an hour to grab something to drink and use the restroom, and then I'm good to go. Like, get me on the next plane. It's been a long day traveling. Nothing wears you out like traveling. I'm ready to like just be in the hotel and chill before I've got to be at meetings at 9 o'clock the next morning. And then I watched them early before they said they were going to like bring the plane I'm supposed to get into. They bring it to the gate and it's sitting there, and I'm like sending pictures to my kids. I'm like, look, my plane's already here. Maybe this is gonna go well, and everything's good. And then the next thing I know, my phone goes off and it says delayed. And I was like, what is this? And the ticket lady comes on. She was very nice, very sweet. You could not pay me enough to have that job. I don't know what they make, but it ain't enough. She comes on and she says, "Where our plane is going to be delayed." And I'm like, "It's right there. Like I could. Like what do you need? I'm right here. Like can I help? Like what's the problem?" And they're like, "Look, it was an international flight. It came in from Cancun. It takes a little bit extra for us to flip those, and so we're just a little delayed." I'm like, "Oh, okay." That's fine. I wait my 20 minutes. We're delayed another 20. It's just taking longer than they thought. There's some stuff, and I'm looking around, and I'm seeing like this crew that is standing under the plane. They do not appear like people who are busy getting a plane ready. Like I can see, like what I'm hearing is we're scrambling to make this plane ready for your 30-minute flight. What I'm seeing is we're on break. We're good. We're done. I don't really know what this is, but it's not like I can see not much is happening. And so we wait another 20 minutes and we wait another 30 minutes. And finally they're like, we're going to begin boarding. We're good to go. Thank you. Thank you. I'm ready to be where I need to be. We get on the plane in a calm, orderly fashion. Everything's good to go. when all of a sudden everybody on the plane's phone goes off at the exact same time. And I don't have to check mine because I can tell by the look on the lady sitting next to me, it is not good news. They canceled the flight. We're sitting on the plane. How do you cancel the flight? Like, I'm right here. Like, I could push this thing back. Let me out. I'll do it. It's fine. It's a 30-minute flight. What, do we don't have enough fuel? Like, come on. They canceled the flight. So I get off the plane, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do because I need to be in Raleigh by 10 o'clock the next morning. I need to be in Raleigh by 10 o'clock the next morning. And so I'm like, I got to catch another flight, except for it's the last flight from Charlotte to Raleigh. I'm like, do any of y'all live in Raleigh? Like, can I hitch a ride? Like, somebody's got to be headed that direction. So I decide I'm going to rent a car. So I scramble down to rent a car, and all they want is me to do a round trip rental where then I got to bring a car back to Charlotte. And I'm not coming back to Charlotte. I'm flying Raleigh to Chicago this time, or to go home. So I'm not coming back to Charlotte. So I don't need to rent a car. So I can't rent a car. So then I have a genius idea. I'm going to take the bus. Don't get ahead of me. So I get an Uber, and I get to the bus, and I'm standing in the Greyhound bus station, and as I'm standing there, it rolls around to be 6:33, and I watch the 6:30 bus to Raleigh pull out of the parking lot. So I get to the counter, I look at the lady, and I go, what are my options? And she says, there's a 9:15 bus, and I'm like, okay, not a problem. And so I sat in the bus station in downtown Charlotte, me in my cowboy boots with my duffel bag, and I felt in exile. Now, I don't mean this to sound terrible. Like, if you're watching online and you live in a city, fine. That's good for you. But there is a reason I live where I live. Like, it is not my thing to be in a place where there's no sun or there's no grass. Like, I don't understand, but I'm sitting in this place in this very unfamiliar environment, and I'm watching people live and act in a way that is unfamiliar to me. It feels very foreign. I watched a gentleman sitting in a wheelchair take his prosthetic leg and try and break the glass of the vending machine. I watched, and the whole time that was happening, I was like, I could get somebody, but I'm going to get so many miles out of this for a sermon illustration. This is just going to have to happen. I watched two people get into a verbal altercation over a Pepsi and whose really it was. I watched all kinds of things that just didn't fit the narrative of my life, the way that I normally interact. And I was like, what in the world is this? And so the 9:15 bus to Raleigh arrived in Charlotte at about 10:35. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I finally got to my hotel. And when I walk in the door, the lady says, we're out of king-size beds. Are you okay with a queen? I was like, lady, I'll sleep on the couch. I'm tired. Did you ever have a moment when you just didn't feel like you fit? Did you ever have a moment where you're looking around going, what in the world am I doing here? Honestly, I needed to be in those meetings. They were phenomenal meetings. The friends that I've made over there are phenomenal. The people that I met over there were wonderful. The work they're doing is amazing. But sitting in that bus stop, I'd given you about every dollar I had to take a direct flight back to Hatton. Have you ever been there? Where you're looking around in an unfamiliar situation or an unfamiliar surrounding, and you've been thinking to yourself, I'm just not sure this is for me. Like I just don't know that I quite belong here. Like suddenly it became really clear the place that you're at just isn't home. I think we've all been there. I think we've all done that at some point. Even humorous moments or moments that feel that. I think we all have at some point felt like disillusionment or restlessness or even just like feeling dislocated from what's happening around us. I think sometimes even this happens to me. Like I watch the news. Don't do that. But I watch the news sometimes and I look at it and be like, this world is so unfamiliar to the world I grew up in. Or I hear some of our young people talk about the things they deal with in school, and I think that is so unfamiliar from the world that I knew. Or I look at the environment and the society that I'm handing my kids, and I think that is so unfamiliar from the world that I inherited. I think we all know what it's like to feel that dislocation, that unfamiliarity. And this can happen even in places that were once comfortable, even in places that once felt like they were. I'm hoping that this part of this message doesn't get me in trouble because I need her to watch my kids. But like I have now lived away from my parents for so long that to go back and visit, I'm like, it just feels different. Like this isn't my home anymore. Like it's theirs. Like they've rearranged the kitchen and they moved some things around and they started storing stuff in my bedroom. In my bedroom. They've started storing things in there. As if this clear sign of like you left once and came back. The moment you left the second time, we converted this room into something you couldn't stay in, so there was no return policy, is what my father told my wife on the day we got married. But like you get into that place where even things that feel familiar leave you hungry for something more permanent, something that feels more stuck. And faithfully, we all long for something because a tenet of our faith is that this world is not our home. We're going to read about people who wandered looking for something more today. We're going to look at the book of Hebrews, and we're going to be in chapter 11, and we're going to spend some time talking about what does it look like to seek more, to seek home. From Hebrews chapter 11, we're going to read just the first 3 verses here, and then we'll talk about it. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. This is what our ancestors were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. Faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. My history, my family history is riddled for people who had a confidence and an assurance in things they hoped for but could not see. They got in boats and traveled across an Atlantic. They got in a covered wagon and headed as far as Missouri, and maybe one day we'll keep making the trip. They longed for something more. They saw a better promise. They worked tirelessly and built and created space and owned homes and were the first to go to a junior college so that I could be the first to graduate from a graduate school. And they worked hard and tirelessly to build a life, knowing that there were rewards they would never reap, but that the next generation would see made possible. Our faith is a trust in things we do not see. It is a trust that there is more at work in our lives, more at work in our stories than just ourselves. Our faith anchors us, roots us in the, yes, invisible, but still very real promises of God's presence. And that's important because there are days, Like, can I just be honest? Like, as a pastor, like, there are days when those promises seem really distant. When I find this aching in my heart and I wonder, where are you? And faith is the assurance that even when I'm wondering that, even when God feels distance, God is close. Faith is the promise that there is something more coming, something better, something on the other side of this hurt, on the other side of this grief, on the other side of this pain. It is the promise that there is something I can cling to. Picking up in verse 8. If I can flip the page. Here we go. By faith, Abraham was called to go to the place that he would later receive as his inheritance, and obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in a promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of that same promise. For he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder was God. I love the story of Abraham and Sarah. I love this idea of God just showing up one day and saying, hey, all this thing that you know, all this stuff that you have clung to, all the things that feel permanent, I need you to leave it all behind. We're going to do something really cool. Now, how about now? There we go. But their lives were shaped by this trust that causes them to seek something better, a homeland that their generations will be built upon. As Americans, there's a piece of us that knows that story. That it lives in our family history of those who sacrificed and left to build a foundation for us to live on, to grow on as Pleasant Grove. We know that story of those who came before, the generations that built the very foundations on which we now stand. And that call us to keep going. They didn't just build it so that then we could rest on our laurels and stop and go, well, that's really good. But they call us to keep pushing, keep seeking, to drive, to live. Picking up in verse 13, it says, all of these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not yet receive the things they promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they were looking for a country of their own. If they had been looking for the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. But instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has promised a city for them as well. In 2 Corinthians, Paul tells us that we are to be ambassadors in this foreign land. I love that image, the idea of being an ambassador for Jesus, of recognizing that my citizenship is in something greater than the stuff of this world, but that I'm called to live in that hostile and unfamiliar space as a representative of this larger thing that stands behind me. The idea of being present in the face of it. And so as we look at building on an opportunities, we look at building our fall routines, as we look at building lives, as we look at fresh starts that come with this season, I think there is a call here to live as strangers and foreigners, as ambassadors. Recognizing that although at times being true to who God calls you to be, being true to the way God calls you to live in the world, being true to the things God calls you to, rarely does that faithfulness immediately achieve reward. In fact, what I have learned with my vast less than 40 years of experience, some of you were supposed to chuckle at that. You're not that experienced. You're so young, Pastor. Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Now I'm off track. What I've learned is rarely does short-term comfort and long-term success equal the same decision. If you're going to have one, you're sacrificing the other. If you choose short-term comfort, you are sacrificing long-term success. If you choose long-term success, you are likely sacrificing short-term comfort. I have never in my life met anybody who I said, "Tell me how you got successful." Well, one day I did the thing that was comfortable and I just kept doing that. Rarely does the faithfulness that God calls us to, rarely does it reap immediate reward. In fact, Hebrews tells us that some of them died, yet not receiving the things they had promised. Homeland is both a future hope and a present orientation. It is a way that we live about in society. It is to live as those who know that there is something more on the other side, that this is not home, merely a place we're passing through. We are ambassadors of a foreign land, present in the community, aware of the struggles and the hurt, faithful to try and serve and fix what we can where we can, but also recognizing that something greater stands behind us. Representatives of Jesus moving in the world. But it requires discomfort. But it requires being challenged. It requires living as citizens of something more. It requires a willingness to go where God calls, even when the destination is unclear, uncomfortable, and really not on our agenda. And so as we move into the new school year, as we reorient our lives, as we look for new patterns and new opportunities, as we look to reboot and reschedule, as we look to begin, some of us. The question is, how will you live as a foreigner in a strange land? How will you live as an ambassador of Jesus? How will you live with the faithfulness that stirs you to do big things, audacious things, uncomfortable things for the one who calls you forward? Let us pray. Holy God, help us to live as a community of faithful exiles. Help us to stand in the lineage of Sarah and Abraham, of the great cloud of witnesses who have built for us a life and a foundation. Help us to live as ambassadors in this foreign land, welcoming the stranger, embracing the journey of faith, and keeping our eyes on what God has prepared for us. Let us not, O God, settle for the comforts of the familiar, but let us be those who seek the city whose architect and builder is God who calls us forward. keeping our hearts from being drawn backward, but instead, ever homeward.